enjoyed a presentation by Professor, Jake Lynch, and really, you may recall last year, I gave a lot of interviews to foreign correspondents, but we Koreans, whenever there are lots of war correspondents, we see that. When there are lots of diplomatic correspondents, we see ray of hope. Therefore, to that extent, journalism really matters. Journalism can shape peace, dialogue and negotiation on the Korean Peninsula. Journalism can foster an atmosphere of war, military tension on the Korean Peninsula. I would say that the Korean Peninsula, or the Seoul, is the most vivid place in which you can see the crossroad of war and peace through the eyes of the foreign, particularly foreign journalists. Okay, and it is true, when there are a lot of so-called war correspondents came to Seoul, that we all thought that, and also they gave a report that an American military base in South Korea, and we thought that war might be coming. Okay, and then when a lot of foreign correspondents come to Korea to cover summit talks and whatever, then there's a big chance for the peace settlement on the Korean Peninsula. Likewise, journalism can shape war and peace on the Korean Peninsula. But in doing that, I think one of the most important things is how do you report on North Korea? Okay, I'm a North Korean specialist, a kind, and also I was deeply involved in policy on North Korea. I've been to North Korea so many times. I'm the only South Korean civilian who attended the first, second, and third Korean summit in Pyongyang. Therefore, I can say something about how to report on North Korea in such a way to promote peace while discouraging military action on the Korean Peninsula. The first proposition I want to really make is the idea of don't demonize North Korea. Well, we all know North Korea is demonic, okay? North Korea executed, North Korean leader executed his uncle Jang Sung-taek, executed the chief of in the army, without any notice, and also his, half-brother was assassinated in Malaysia. We all know in North Korea, there's a lack of human rights in North Korea. However, don't treat North Korea as a demon. Demons do not negotiate. If you do not negotiate, what will be the outcome? There is a military conflict, the war, getting rid of North Korean leader that can bring about enormous collateral damage to Korean people. Okay. I still remember the former Secretary of Defense of the United States, William Paris, in a very good wording. He has been to Pyongyang several times in the process of shaping Paris process. What Dr. Perry told us is this: try to read North Korea, try to understand North Korea what it is, not as you wish to understand. That is a very, very important one. If you demonize North Korea, then you have several stereotypes which you see only bad things of North Korea. And I think Professor Lynch made a good point. For example, very few international journalists would believe that they would believe that it is North Korea who torn apart Geneva Agreement framework. Very few would know that it was the Bush administration which screwed up the Geneva Agreement framework. Same for the September 19th joint statement of 2005. The day after they signed September 19th joint statement, the United States imposed a sanction on North Korea. That really torn apart entire negotiation process, resulting in North Korea's first nuclear testing on October 9th, 2006. Okay? Therefore, it is very important for you to understand in both ways, rather than one stereotyped way. And also, it is very important for us to listen what North Korea is saying. We have a tendency to regard whatever North Korea says as a propaganda. If you read Nodong Shinbun very carefully, if you listen to Korea Central News Agents very carefully, there is a kernel of truth, okay, with which you can report objectively. But we tend to disregard it. And instead, we tend to read the New York Times, Washington Post, Western news media, or the Western specialists. That we tend to see North Korea through the prism of so-called Western expert in North Korea. But The international journalists rather not to look at North Korea as it is through the North Korean medium. And also, if you analyze North Korean behavior very carefully, it is extremely difficult to make a distinction between North Korean behavior of cheating and hedging. Hedging can be acceptable. Cheating is not acceptable. But if you demonize North Korea, you never see North Korean maneuver of hedging. You only see cheating. Then there's no further progress. Therefore, I really wanted to emphasize, don't try to demonize, no matter how demonic North Korea could be. My second proposition is be realistic and practical. But if you look at the so-called American policy behavior toward North Korea, there is a tendency of, I'm the old-fashioned guy, and if I'm not familiar with the PPT, I usually talk, but they asked me to use the PPT. But, as I pointed out here, goals for negotiation should be adjusted to changing circumstances. But North Korea now has shown a lot of changes. North Korea dismantled the Punggye underground nuclear testing site. North Korea also about to dismantle missile engine, the ballistic missile engine test site in Dongchangli. And North Korea is also committed to permanent dismantling of the nuclear facilities in Yongbyon area. However, we don't see that kind of positive side of North Korea. And the United States tend to stick to its old principle. I agree with the CVID. Complete, verifiable, irreversible dismantling of nuclear weapons should be our goal. But in approaching that goal, we need to be more realistic and practical. Look at the American approach. America always emphasizes all-in-one. North Korea, on the contrary, argues for the incremental approach. The United States argues for you dismantle first, then we'll reward you. North Korean position, no, we cannot do that. Let us do simultaneous exchange under the principle of action for action. American approach is very rigid, okay? And it's somewhat idealistic. It's America, John Bolton wanted to complete the nuclearization of North Korea within 1 year. Compare one within 2.5 years. Then that may not be realistic, okay? We got to be more realistic. If you stick to the whole very, very impractical approach to North Korea, and the result would be catastrophic, outcomes. Therefore, we should avoid that kind of, approach first. Third proposition is avoid the rigid and unilateral approach. That really, kind of overlaps with the second proposition. But as with all other negotiation with North Korea should be flexible. The unilateral approach can backfire. But here again, now look at the current debate. Now, there's two sets of debate. One set of debate is what? American position is they tell North Koreans that you got to declare and accept international inspection first. Then we'll consider adopting end-of-war declaration. North Korean position, no, we cannot accept it. In fact, when I was in Pyongyang, to the recent Pyongyang summit, I talked with very senior officials of North Korea. I urged them, why don't you accept it? Why don't you just accept the declaration inspection so that you can move on to the end-of-war declaration and trust building with North Korea? But North Korean position is very straightforward. Look, now we are in hostile relation with North Korea. How can we declare the list of nuclear facilities, materials, and weapons, the quantities, and the location? There is no guarantee that the United States will undertake a preemptive attack on us. We cannot trust. That is why North Korea has been arguing that we got to adopt the end-of-war declaration, build trust, then we can go for declaration and inspection. And they also argue that Look, American intelligence community has been arguing that the North Korea has a 60 to 65 nuclear warheads. Suppose if we do not have that amount of nuclear warheads, suppose we have a 20. Then if we declare 20 nuclear warheads, then American government will say that that's not enough. You're hiding other nuclear warhead. Then North Koreans saying that then that kind of demand will lead to the entire derailment of negotiation between Washington and Pyongyang. Therefore, they argue that it is unfair for the U.S. to demand the declaration and inspection first. It is much wiser to adopt Endeavour Declaration, build trust, and particularly build trust through the adoption of non-aggression treaty. Then North Korea argued that we can come up with a declaration and inspection. That is one in a good point. Another rigid aspect of American approach is this idea of a complete denuclearization and the corresponding measures. Our South Korean government position is this. President Moon Jae-in had a tour of Europe, and he told the European leaders, if North Korea show irreversible stage of denuclearization, let us consider giving some kind of easing of economic sanctions against North Korea. I think it is much more practical and much more flexible. But the American position is this. No, that's impossible. Unless North Korea show complete denuclearization, there won't be any inch of easing of economic sanctions against North Korea. I really don't think that's really realistic and flexible. Therefore, I would argue that the United States needs to be more flexible in dealing with North Korea. Even your reporting of North Korea needs to take into account that aspect. Another good example is this. You may all know that Siegfried Hecker, the renowned nuclear scientist at the Stanford University, he was telling me a very interesting story. There is no such a thing as a unilateral inspection and verification. Inspection and verification should be cooperative. His basic argument is this: without North Korean cooperation, it is impossible to engage in effective inspection and verification. Even dismantling of nuclear bombs. John Bolton says that let us bring the North Korean nuclear bombs, bring them to the Oak Ridge in Tennessee, let us dismantle. But Dr. Hecker warning all of us that it is impossible. Only those who design the bomb can dismantle it properly. Otherwise, it's too risky. Okay? Then how can you obtain cooperation of North Korean nuclear scientists when you allow peaceful use of nuclear energy, atomic energy? Then North Korean nuclear scientists will cooperate. But the American position is that even peaceful use of nuclear energy is not allowed. Okay? Another good example is this. North Korea has been arguing that we are entitled to the peaceful use of space. Therefore, we are entitled to launch a rocket for satellite. But the American position is very clear. No, you are using the application of ballistic missile, therefore you cannot do that. But there is another rigid point. In return for North Korea's complete amendment of ICBM, intermediate range in the missiles, even Scud missiles, maybe we may allow it. South and North Korea cooperate together. And North Korea has a boosting technology, South Korea has satellite technology. We can come up with joint cooperation. In that way, we can solve the North Korean nuclear problem. It's much more flexible way. That is my third proposition: avoid rigid and unilateral approach. And basically, North Korean position is very simple. We are not a defeated nation. Don't treat us as if we have to surrender to the United States. That is another very important aspect of this third proposition. Okay? Therefore, I'm emphasizing that it is very, very important to avoid rigid and unilateral approach in dealing with North Korea. And also you may take into account this aspect in reporting on North Korea. Fourth proposition is set the priority right. Okay, Professor Lynch says that the human right is very important. Okay, yeah, I agree with it. But whole point is this now, North Korea has an array of pending issues. Nuclear issues, missiles, biochemical weapons, cybersecurity, human rights, economic opening and reform. There's so many issues related to North Korea. But it is, my basic understanding is this, you cannot solve all those problems simultaneously. You got to set the priority right. For me, the most urgent issue is to deal with the North Korean nuclear and missile issues. And if we can solve North Korean nuclear and missile issues in a very peaceful manner, then we can build the trust. Once we build the trust, then we can tell North Koreans human rights issues much more easy way. Okay? We can tell. Suppose the United States and North Korea succeeded in peaceful settlement of North Korean nuclear issue, then it is quite feasible for President Trump to invite Kim Jong-un to Washington. Maybe he can give a speech in U.S. Congress saying that I'm going to get rid of political prisoners camps and I will improve human rights conditions in North Korea. That is possible only when this most important issue, meaning nuclear and missile issues, can be solved in a peaceful manner. Okay? And also it would be easy for President Moon Jae-in and President Trump to raise the issue when they have strong personal ties. Now we can tell Chairman Kim Jong-un, unless you solve the human rights issues, there's no way for you to have a diplomatic normalization with the United States. Not a single member of Senate would ratify, normalization treaty. But raising human rights issues through the megaphone diplomacy by the American and South Korean government, you cannot really make a progress in human rights because North Korea will regard it as a hostile act. But once you build the trust, it is very easy for President Moon Jae-in to raise the issue to Chairman Kim Jong-un. Unless you really solve the problem, there is no way you can have a meaningful diplomatic normalization in the United States. Even meaningful inter-Korean economic exchange and cooperation may not be possible if North Korea stick to the old pattern of a human rights violation. Therefore, my basic argument is, if nuclear and missile issues are resolved and trust is being built, other issues, including human rights, one can rather be easily resolved. And as a matter of fact, cybersecurity is another really, an annoying issue. For example, I myself has been really hacked by the presumably North Korean, hackers. But again, if we can make a progress in nuclear and missile issues, it is rather easy for us to persuade North Korea to give up that kinds of, so-called hostile acts and human rights violations. Since my time is up, finally, I want to emphasize, be patient, prudent, and objective in dealing with North Korea. Okay? Even reporters, be patient, prudent, and objective in reporting about North Korea. Try to have some kinds of, not necessarily sympathy and empathy, but if you have a better intersubjective understanding of North Korea, you can have a better reporting on North Korea. In that way, you can prevent a conflict on the Korean Peninsula while promoting diplomacy and peace on the Korean Peninsula. Thank you very much.